inside our minds is beautiful and vibrant. We're not the problem. No! Society is, so throw our own party. You're only invited if brain diversity is something you find exciting. 3 cheers to neurodivergency. Raise your cups. Hey! Positivity is non-toxic, so drink up. Here at the Brainbow Connection. Brainbow Connection.
Welcome to Brainbow Connection, your beacon of non-toxic positivity for neurodivergent brains and those who love them. I am Andrea, your neurodivergent host, and I would like to welcome you to the first full episode of Brainbow Connection. I am recording this episode in my car because sometimes we just have to be flexible and take opportunities as they arise. And so when you're going to be sitting in the car for 45 minutes with nothing to do, why not record a podcast episode? So today we are going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart and central to the theme of Brainbow Connection. And that is how to advocate for yourself as a neurodivergent person, or potentially for your friends or loved ones who may be neurodivergent, because we can always use allies. So we're going to talk about 2 spaces in which you can advocate for yourself, as well as a fun little topic at the end that I just feel passionate about. So those 2 spaces that we're going to be talking about are school and work, because I feel like that those are kind of big places where we spend a ton of our time, whether you're a student or, somebody who's in the workforce, then you probably spend a lot of your time at one of those 2 places. I just want to talk about the ways in which you can make these spaces work for you rather than having to change yourself to fit in to these systems that were not created for us. So let's jump right in and talk about some practical ways that you can make school and work places where you can thrive and excel versus places where you feel incomplete or insufficient or like you're not enough. So let's start out with school. First of all, if you are still in school in any capacity, whether you're in, still in like high school or you're in college, my heart goes out to you because these spaces, they're hard to navigate, as a neurodivergent person, and they're not set up for neurodivergent brains to necessarily be successful. We've come a long way, and there's a lot of great teachers and administrators who are making great strides, but a lot of the time, neurodivergent kids can, feel sort of like they're a burden. At least I know I did. I am a 90s baby. And, they were passing out Ritalin like candy when I was in grade school. Every kid who didn't sit still for the entire day was put on Ritalin, and it was crazy. My mom saw this happening and kind of pumped the brakes a little bit and said, no, we're going to wait. Andrea doesn't need to be on Ritalin just yet. Let's hold off. And, I don't know what my life would have been like if I had been on stimulants my entire school education. I probably would have made me a very different person. So I'm kind of glad that my mom saw this and was just like, no, she's just being her. She doesn't need medication. Not that I'm anti-medication in any sense of the word, but I do think that sometimes we jump to that a little too soon and don't explore other options. Or, sometimes a neurodivergent person is just a neurodivergent person, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they don't need to be medicated into submission. Anyway, we're talking about school, and so I want to go on a little bit of a history lesson rant because I have feelings about especially the Western/United States school systems, and I want to give you a little history lesson. So, hey there, Andrea from the future here. Now that I'm not in my damn car, I can give you a proper history lesson, which I had prepared. The modern concept of compulsory education, i.e., where kids are required by law to attend school, came about in the 19th century in Europe and North America. Before that, Formal education was basically limited to really rich people or those getting ready to join the church. One significant influence on Western education is the Prussian education system, which originated in the early 19th century in what is now Germany. The Prussian model emphasized discipline, obedience, and uniformity, aiming to produce obedient citizens and soldiers for the state. The Industrial Revolution played a crucial role in shaping modern education. As societies transitioned from farming to more like factory work, there was a growing need for literate and skilled workers to fill factory jobs. This shift influenced educational priorities with an emphasis on basic literacy, math, and conforming to authority. Think about it. We are all trained from a young age to be employees, to show up on time, to sit in our seats, and to avoid interrupting or distracting others. Those are some tall asks for those of us with a neurodivergent brain. And it does a poor job of preparing students for careers that don't revolve around filling the pockets of a CEO. Instead of allowing students to express their interests and preferences as it relates to learning and their learning style, we force everyone into the same rigid box that only benefits business owners. On the flip side, if we allowed for more flexible curriculums and for adaptive classrooms, we could be training the future CEOs, entrepreneurs, inventors, creators, authors, and more. If you're still in school, there is hope. Although we can't totally transform the education system overnight, bear with me, I am trying. There are ways to adjust your educational experience to better work with your brain. So let's jump back into past Andrea sitting in her car, and I will tell you about some of the accommodations that you can ask for as a student. There are some ways that if you are neurodivergent and you are struggling in school for whatever reason, there's some accommodations you can ask for. And I want to walk through those just so you know what options are available to you if you're in school. And then afterwards, we'll talk about what you can do at work too. But the most important thing when advocating for yourself is proactive communication. If possible, do not wait until there's an issue. Do not wait until the homework is late. Don't wait until the teacher's upset with you because you've done something that disrupts the class. Talk to them ahead of time when they're calm, when you're calm, when there's no crisis happening, and just tell them, your brain works a little bit differently. If you have a diagnosis that you can point to, great. If you can say like, hey, teacher, I'm autistic. I've got ADHD. I've got dyslexia. I've got this. I've got that. At least that gives them some like vocab that maybe they can understand. But even if you don't have a diagnosis and you just know like, hey, I have a really hard time sitting still for an entire hour. Would it be okay if I, got up and, walked to the back of the room and then, walked around a little bit, as long as I don't bother anybody? For the most part, I feel like your teachers should want you to succeed and should want you to do what you need to do to succeed, as long as it doesn't, inhibit the learning of other students. So you may want to ask if you can get up and walk around. You may need to ask for written instructions. If a teacher gives a, verbal instructions for an exercise, maybe tell them that in the future you really do well with written instructions. You can also ask for, different environmental changes. Like, hey, bright lights really, really freak me out sometimes and make it hard for me to focus. Can I not sit right next to the window? Can we dim the lights in the classroom during reading time? Can we do this? Can we do that? There's so many things. Think about if you could design your perfect classroom, what would it be? Would you be allowed to stand up? Would you have dimmer lights? Would you have quieter sound? Like, what do you need? And obviously they can't customize the classroom to every single student, so compromise is going to be important. But what things would you include in your dream classroom? Like, when you are really doing an awesome job and getting your work done and feeling like you're kicking butt, what is that scenario for you? Like, if you do a really good job on your homework at home, but you have struggle at school, what's different at home and what can you maybe implement? Now, there is a chance that your teacher is overworked, underpaid, and spent their last fuck in 1982. If that's the case, you may need to talk to a principal or a school counselor, somebody like that, a parent. Anybody who you think you trust and can help you advocate for yourself, you may need to pull in the big guns. And on the off chance, I really hope this isn't the case for you, but on the off chance that nobody will help you out or accommodate you, just know that this is not your fault. You are trying to learn in a system that was not created for you. So do your best. Do your absolute best as you can, but just know that this isn't your fault. And if you're still in like high school, then know that it does get a little bit easier in college because you do have some more flexibility, but it gets better. You will eventually encounter people who are on your side, who want the best for you and who want you to succeed. Worst case scenario, and I say worst case scenario as in this is like the most extreme option. It's not a bad thing in any way, shape, or form, but you can also work with parents and teachers to develop an IEP or just a actual formal plan of accommodations that you need. I think this is sometimes easier if you do have a diagnosis from a doctor, but even if you don't, it's something to explore. Talk to your parents, talk to your teachers. There are protections in place for students who have different needs. And if that's you, then you just you have to advocate for yourself, and you need to do so as soon as possible and just communicate it clearly and with compassion, and hopefully you'll be met with compassion back. Let's jump to work, because this is the world that I live in, and I have had lots of jobs that were not neurodivergent friendly, and I am finally in like the dream work scenario. I work from home. My schedule is really flexible. I can take breaks when I need to. I can get up and walk around when I need to. I can get a snack, a drink, whatever when I need to. And it's amazing. But that is not everybody's world. And so I'm going to mostly be talking about those of you who probably still have to go to a physical office and the accommodations that you can ask for in that scenario. But we will talk a little bit about working from home, because that is actually an example of an accommodation. Some employers are really strict about it, and some employers are more chill about it. But is working from home some days, or part of the time, or days you don't have any meetings, is that an option for you? And so the same is true for employees as it is for students. You want to be proactive, and you want to communicate with the people who have the ability to impact your daily life. So if that's your manager, if that's a coworker, if that's a team leader, whatever, you want to just go to them in a moment that isn't, stressful. Don't wait until, you're supposed to be turning in something in an hour and you aren't going to have it done. Go to your manager and just say, hey, I wanted to let you know, and you don't have to disclose a diagnosis. You do not have to tell your boss that you have ADHD, or that you're on the spectrum, or that you have any sort of diagnosis whatsoever. That is not information that you need to share with them unless you're comfortable and you think it would help. Because again, sometimes, giving the diagnosis kind of gives people a signpost that they recognize. They're like, oh, okay, I've heard of ADHD. I kind of understand, what that means. And it helps them sometimes to understand. But you are not obligated to tell your boss anything. You're not obligated to tell anybody at work anything. You can tell HR, human resources, if you want to, but you do not need to disclose a diagnosis to have these conversations. And so going to your boss and saying, hey, could I work from home on the days that I don't have any meetings, because I really get better work done there because there's less distractions. You could ask to hide out in a conference room that's not being used so you can get some quiet time and, focus time. You can just let your boss know that, hey, you're going to be wearing noise canceling headphones when you're in focus mode. And so that's a thing that you need to do to get your best work done. And again, your boss should be in favor of anything that you need to do your job better, because that's what they want, is they want the work to get done well. So if you can provide them with solutions and say, if I can do X, Y, and Z, then I will be much better at my job, they should be all for that. Now, I've had shitty bosses, and I'm sure some of you have shitty bosses who just don't care anymore. They're mean. There's something going on with them. It's not about you, but they suck for whatever reason. And that is when you want to potentially talk to someone in human resources, because there are legal protections for people who have, they say disabilities. There are legal protections for people with disabilities, which a lot of these neurodivergent conditions are considered disabilities, which don't even get me started on the problem of, the problem with that. But it does mean that there are laws that are protecting you that say you can't be fired for being neurodivergent, you can't be reprimanded for being neurodivergent, and your job needs to make reasonable accommodations for you. So if you're in the United States, I want you to Google the American with Disabilities Act, and that is going to give you information on the types of accommodations that you are entitled to and what your job is legally required to provide you as a person with disabilities. If you are not in the U.S., then go ahead and Google your country's name, or maybe even your county or city's name if you're in like a bigger area, but your country's name plus disability protection laws. And that is going to give you a similar idea of what you can legally ask for of your employer. So be proactive. Talk to your boss or your teacher or your principal or your parent or your counselor or your HR representative. Talk to them about what you need. And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, because you are your number one advocate. No one else is going to do it for you. Ask for what you need. Think about what your ideal work or school scenario would be. When do you do your best work? And that might mean asking for extra time on assignments or projects at work. That might mean just being really realistic about how long it takes you to get something done. If your boss says, hey, can you have that report done by Thursday? And you're like, oh, actually, I know I've got meetings all day tomorrow and I'm not have a ton of time to really focus. Can I have till Monday on that? And usually if you ask and it's ahead of time, people will be receptive. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't procrastinate like I do. And then at the last minute say, oops, I need more time because I procrastinated. That's not a good look. But just be honest with yourself. If you are a procrastinator, ask for an extra few days. Don't agree to the earliest deadline just because you want to impress everybody like I do. That's what I do. I agree. I tell people that I can get something done by tomorrow, and there's no way in hell I can get it done by tomorrow, and then I end up looking bad. So don't do what I do. Advocate for yourself, communicate, and be honest. Now, there's one quick thing that I want to talk about at the end here, and it's kind of a big topic, so we're only going to touch on it very briefly, but I just want to plant the seed for you. And that is the idea of intersectionality. Now, intersectionality was actually the term was coined by I think a lawyer in the 1980s, and it is pretty focused on oppression, discrimination, that kind of thing. But it's the idea that everybody is members of multiple communities. So, for example, you and I are members of the neurodiverse community, but very few people are just neurodiverse. You may be neurodiverse and a person of color. You may be neurodiverse and a woman like I am. You may be neurodiverse and a member of the LGBTQ plus community. You may be neurodiverse and any number of other identities. And those things all combine into a unique experience. People who are neurodiverse experience certain stigmas and discriminations, but a Black woman also experiences certain stigmas and discriminations. And so those discriminations from being a Black woman are then combined with the discriminations of being neurodivergent, and you've got a unique set of hurdles to jump over. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about the fact that even though we're all neurodiverse, which is cool and beautiful, we're all so different. We're all from so many different other communities that none of our experiences are going to be exactly the same. And we just need to make sure that we make the neurodiverse community a welcoming place for all neurodiverse people, not just the neurodiverse people who look like us, who experience things like us, who think like us. That's the problem with society, is that it expects everyone to be the same. Well, we know that that's not true. And I just want to make sure that we are listening and hearing our neurodiverse friends who may be members of other marginalized communities. We want to make sure to lift those voices up. We want to hear them and share their stories and validate them and celebrate them just like we celebrate ourselves, because again, no one is just neurodiverse. No one is just one thing. We are all so many things, and that is so freaking beautiful. But, be sensitive to the fact that there are people in this community that are not just dealing with the struggles of being neurodiverse. They're also dealing with the struggles and the oppression and the stigma and the, discrimination of different groups as well. Because if you're not a white man, you're going to have some struggles, and that really sucks, but we're going to change it together. Keep intersectionality in the back of your mind as you're listening to this podcast. Advocate for yourself if you are a student or an employee, and just know that you are not the problem. And there are ways for you to thrive and do your best work without having to give up what makes you you, or jump through crazy hoops to fit into a mold that wasn't made for you. So advocate for yourself. Subscribe to this podcast if you enjoyed it, and please share it because that helps so much. Seriously, take a screenshot, put it on your Instagram stories, tag me. My Instagram will be in the show notes. But subscribe and share. That is my big ask for you this episode, because that helps a ton. And I just want you to know that I love you to bits. Stay colorful, stay curious, and I will see you on the next episode of Brainbow Connection.
3 cheers to neurodivergency.